Hey climbers, and welcome back to the treehouse. My name's Ree and this is the tarot tree, and today I thought we'd do a little VR back to tarot Natt Plans. A great channel, check her out. She's been doing some really cool videos lately, and I saw she made this tag called intimidating decks, and I thought, oh, that's a good one to get our teeth into. Because really and truthfully, you know, how many of us have these decks that we've seen, you know, they've caught our eye, we've seen them on other people's channel, been intrigued, you know, got them into our collections, and then kind of realized, oh my goodness, okay, this might not be as straightforward as it seems, or, you know, there's so many different reasons why decks can be intimidating, whether it's their energy is intimidating, whether it's learning a whole new system is intimidating, whether it's not gelling the way you thought it was. You know, so many different facets to this that I think this tag gives us the scope to explore. So hopefully you guys will, you know, enjoy it and come along with me as I do it for my collection. And so I definitely have a couple of intimidating decks, that's for sure, and for a few different reasons, you know, as we'll dive into as we go through. So without further ado, let's get going. Okay. First up, you guys may laugh at this because it's quite dramatic but funny at the same time how it fits in. So intimidating is this deck that it comes locked in its very own box. Prison. Oh my gosh, how beautiful is this box that I got on Etsy. I can remember the seller. I'll definitely put the links in the description. But ta-da! It opens. We open the prison and the jail cell to reveal the Wildwood Tarot. Yes. This, my friends, is a very intimidating deck for me. And we'll dive into that right now. A bit like this wanderer, or this fool as it were. So as you're gonna see, it's in order because literally since I've got this, I have sort of had a look through, but really and truthfully, I haven't had the time to kind of really get into this yet. So it's kind of been a little locked away, you know. I'm doing a deep dive with a different deck, and this one has not been given its time yet. And that's why it's intimidating, because I feel like there's a lot to learn. I mean, some of the energy in this is kind of quite menacing too. You know, even this guy here, very like druid energy I'll get off this deck. It speaks a lot to me. Its art really drew me in. Its sort of woodland energy drew me in. You know, the Wildwood Tarot. It's a classic, right? So many of us know it, probably have it within our collections, and it speaks to us, but it's not your classic right away. There's a lot to dive into with this. And I think, you know, I saw on Sandy from Exploring Tarot's kind of VR to this tag, this was within her kind of intimidating deck collection too. And that is, you know, not because we don't love it, not because we don't love the energy, but there seems to be a lot to learn when it comes to it, you know. And it deserves that kind of that study, and I just haven't, much like Sandy, had the time to do that with this deck yet. So it's sort of been locked away, and I want to give it that time. I really want to sit with it and soak it in. Look, the moon on water. There's so much symbology, so much to go into with this deck. So much to learn about my kind of Celtic roots. Oh, the world tree. I love this. Look at all the seasons captured in one tree. How beautiful. You know, I find the court cards very intimidating with this deck. As we know, if you're a part of this channel, or you're going to find out right now if you're new, is court cards are something I struggle with the most in tarot decks, especially if they don't speak to a character that sort of I link with those kind of court cards. And here in the court cards, it's a lot of animal energy, which is something you know, I know, and you know, a fair amount about animals and kind of their symbolic kind of meanings to a degree. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in any way, shape or form. I kind of know a lot, you know, about them through watching David Attenborough and documentaries, mainly, you know, about their sort of, you know, meaning, I guess, in the day-to-day in terms of what they do, what their kind of characteristics are. But in terms of talking to the court cards, I haven't got a clue. And I really want to dive into the book, which is, you know, a quick flick through seems like astounding. It seems like there's a lot there, you know, for sure. And I can see why people definitely love this deck, but it is a deep dive for me. You know, it's got quite strong imagery, takes me back to like quite a primal kind of age, an old age for me, like with my ancestors. That's the kind of vibe I get from it. Obviously I come from Celtic stock, so maybe it's resonating with me in that kind of regard too. And we got a few kind of gruesome kind of stories and parables about our culture for sure, some kind of hard-hitting ones which I feel this is going to have a nod to for sure. But I do feel like it's got this sort of sage teacher kind of energy to it as well, even if we can see here in this 10 of arrows instruction, you know, it's different, the meanings are different, right? Even the whole kind of naming of the cards and the suits have changed, so it takes a lot to get your head around, but I do feel like it'll be worthwhile. But it's intimidating, you know. The energy of this deck is very palpable too, that kind of strong forest energy. I'm trying to find the best way to describe it. You know, when you walk in a forest and it can be very peaceful and serene, but there's this sort of old, like you might be walking into a kind of different realm, you don't know what's around the corner, the light all looks mottled and different and things of that nature, like you're walking into a different world almost. I wouldn't go quite as far as saying it has fae energy though, maybe, but it's just got that sort of slight eeriness that woods and forests can have sometimes for me, and I find that quite intimidating. I feel like some of the cards are quite strong, some of the characters in this are very strong as well. If we saw earlier, you know, we saw that Guardian card, you know, the card that donates the devil in this as well. This guy, he's kind of creepy. Yeah, we do get that fake kind of energy too, to be fair, don't we? And that's quite disconcerting at times. So yeah, this deck is intimidating on a few different levels for me. Again, those animal court cards, that sort of visceral woodland kind of eerie energy, and just the sheer amount of changes to the system in a regards, you know, the suits have been changed. And although we have like keywords to help us, which hopefully will be helpful in our way, it's still a lot to learn. And because it's such a beautiful deck, it deserves that learning time, I think, for sure. Even the characters in this, I've said, I think, I find some of them a bit intimidating, the way they're drawn. They're a little bit like, I don't know if you can tell, like this, I don't know, this child just gave me the heebie-jeebies as I saw him there for some reason, even though it's for endurance and Five of Pentacles, he's been left out in the cold, but he's, you know, looking after himself. I don't know why. Somehow the faces are drawn, they're very like ancient looking beings, and there's something quite, for me anyway, I don't know, like that ancestral energy can be quite strong and intimidating for me at times, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm getting this sense of, especially when we see these sort of like almost like caveman times as well, maybe it's taking me back to the energy of survival, and that's why it's intimidating. Like, you know, this is a hard moment for humans to live, you know, it's a hard life to kind of survive, and I get that sort of survivor element from this deck too, so that's why it's intimidating. But I'm going to give it a go, as I said. So for now, not right now though. I feel like once I've got done with my most recent kind of deep dive and learning of a deck, this will be next. So maybe within, you know, by the time we kind of get to the end of spring. Although I think working with this in autumn might be better, but we'll see if I do it seasonally or if I crack it out as Prism before then. So yeah, this is the Wildwood Tarot, guys. Definitely an intimidating deck for me, for sure. Okay, next up, we have a Oracle as offering as an intimidating deck. Might be a surprise for some of you guys, because I know this is an intuitive reader for quite a few people, and I know people love this deck. But for me, surprised me, but yep, I find it quite intimidating, and I'll tell you why. So, the Illuminated Earth Oracle. Why do I find this deck intimidating? First and foremost, it's a deck that didn't gel with me as fast as I thought it would. It isn't an intuitive reader for me wholly, particularly the elemental more cards of this, or as you can see, the cards with the imagery that's a little bit more sparse. For whatever reason, like there's palpable energy from this deck, which I find quite intimidating as well, which we'll get into. But it's more that I struggle to read it, which is why it's intimidating, and it deserves more kind of I need to use it more, I think, to get used to it and to sit with it a bit more. But because the energy sometimes is a little bit intimidating, I have to say it's like it's not the most comfortable experience for me to sit with this deck for some reason. I'm really trying to find the words to kind of put this across, but if we go back here, we have like fire. So cards like this in this deck is what I find difficult to kind of get reads from, like what does fire mean to me? What are these symbols telling me? Is there something I'm missing here? Like, yeah, I kind of get Mars energy. Do you know what I mean? There's the sparseness of it. I find a bit like, oh, I have nothing to draw on, which can sometimes make me panic a little bit, especially when, you know, not all sparse kind of decks do that for me. Like, you know, I've got a lot of decks that can quite, you know, you would say the imagery is quite simple and yet they're very intuitive for me, but this, for whatever reason, hasn't been. I don't know if it's the murkiness of the colours, almost this mottled kind of ink blot kind of situation we have going on here. Like, but I don't always marry the meaning of the card with the symbols or the imagery on it, particularly within the more elemental cards of this. Patience. And yet it speaks to so many things that, you know, interest me, like geometry, colour, you know, shape, things of that nature. But no, for whatever reason, it is a struggle. So we have to work with you more and get used to your energy. I also find them a bit confronting, but I can't put the emotion on it. So you're going to find, like, as I'm trying to describe it here, why it's intimidating, because I do find it hard to find the word to describe it. When we've got cards like this where the figures come into it, I find it a lot more easier, you know. I like the energy, they're more softer cards for whatever reason. Not that I have a problem with hard hitting cards, but for some reason in this deck, it feels like I don't have enough to draw upon sometimes. Or maybe I need to like deepen my knowledge of some of this symbolism potentially. Or like I said, just sit with it more. But it does have this very elemental kind of otherworldly kind of energy to it that I just, maybe that's what's intimidating. I've realised I'm not as in touch with this as I would like to be. Got the illuminated earth. Maybe I need to become more illuminated myself before I can make proper good use of this deck, or maybe for using it I will. But I just need to get past that sort of block. We got the block there, that block with this deck. You know, it is kind of sassy though. Sometimes with the keywords, it does bring these cards out for me that do definitely speak to me. So I think it's trying to, I definitely think that it's trying to communicate with me and give me that sort of leg up. Like, it's okay. Like, don't be too, like, you know, don't be too intimidated by me. You know, we can work together. I do get that from it. And I do think we will going forward. But it's just, I feel like I'm in an in-between world when I see some of the cards in this, if that makes sense. Like, in between the material and the spiritual, like in some weird dimension, where things don't fully make sense or aren't as clear, but there's something very like primal in me that kind of understands that. I don't know if that makes sense, but you know, I feel like I'm a little bit in the dark of this deck at certain points, but there's knowledge there within me to be unlocked in order to understand it. Maybe I'm just not ready to fully go there with it yet. This card really kind of sums it up a bit well, actually. The air card, because you have this sort of very like, you know, these just geometric kind of shapes here just lulling about, and then you've got the more detailed, you know, the spheres here of like different scenery. That's like almost like, you know, you're in that in-between bit. I don't know if you've seen Interstellar, right? When he falls through all of them string kind of things and he's piercing into memories, and that's what he's looking through the portals, but he's in this in-between. That's what this deck feels like to me. Like, oh, like the veil. Maybe it's the veil that this deck feels like. Oh gosh, that in-between phase. I gotta sit with it more, and I feel like more will come up for me. But I just feel like there's a little block there with it, you know, which I wasn't expecting. So it's that lack of, like, that sort of assuming I was just gonna get on with it, which sort of like is why it was more confronting and intimidating for me, I think. But we'll get there, we'll get there. I'll definitely give you updates on how I do with it. I've definitely been trying to work with it. I think it may be one of my spring decks, although I feel like it's more of an autumn winter energy in my opinion with the darkness in this. But yeah, you let me know what you think. I feel like there's another one, was it the Faceted Garden? When I've seen that, that speaks more to the spring summer energy for me. But yeah, a beautiful deck nonetheless, pairs very well with a lot of my other decks. But again, that elemental, especially the elemental cards in this, the more sparse cards, intimidating, really truthfully. So yeah, that's the Illuminated Earth Oracle. Let me know how you find working with this. I know a lot of you have it, and I know a lot of you love it. So it'd be really interesting to know how you guys bonded with it, if it was just straight off the bat for you or not. So yeah, let me know, guys. That's that one. Next up, we probably have one of the most intimidating decks in terms of confronting me on my lack of knowledge and the gaps in my knowledge. And funnily enough, one of the first ever tarot decks I bought, believe it or not. Why? What possessed me? I don't know. Well, I'll let you know. It's the imagery. I find it striking. And that is the Hermetic Tarot. And this is based upon the esoteric workings of the secret order of the Golden Dawn. Of the Golden Dawn, should I say? I don't know what I said there. Maybe I said that. Something I know precious little about. I've not delved into that side of tarot, I have to say. Like, I've not even gone into Toth, like that kind of deep yet at all. And this, you will look at the symbolism in this deck. It's wasted on me, but I love it. But I just don't understand the majority of it. And I feel like there's so many layers to this. That's what's so intimidating. It's almost too much. It's like overwhelming for me. And because I have so many gaps in my knowledge of the esoteric, if I have any at all, like I can understand maybe some of the zodiac kind of nods and things of that nature, but very precious little. Maybe some of the planets, associations, and even this gives you kind of, titles that could potentially help, but also can throw you off here. Lord of the Root of the Powers of Earth. Like, what's going on? There's a lot. There's just a lot going on in this deck. And I loved, I saw this on a tarot reader's channel and thought, I gotta have that. Just purely aesthetically, not understanding any of the relevance of anything going on here. You have plant language in here. You have that sort of Marseille sort of directional pip kind of language in here. You have so much symbolism within this deck that I just don't understand in any way, shape or form, really and truthfully. So much so that I just don't use it at all. And it's a shame. But I don't want to get rid of it from my collection for some reason. I feel like as I go on, maybe then, I will deal with this. I will get more use from it. Oh, what's this? Okay, they're the back and front cards. I was like, what's happened there? Lord of Wealth, Ten of Pentacles, It's hard to read with, and that's why I find it intimidating, just because there's just so much symbolism that I'm not familiar with. The energy is quite palpable as well, especially with the like monochromatic black and white art. It's quite strong and quite confronting in that regard. But this one, yeah, like I said, the intimidation really comes in me having such little knowledge of the esoteric at this point in time. And I feel like it takes a lot of study, and a lot of kind of want to study it, which I'm just not at that point in my practice right now, at this moment in time. I still love my Rider Waite Smith, ride or die Waite Smith. I may get into this at some point. Like I said, I don't see myself getting rid of this deck, but I feel like it's going to take a lot of study, and I may jump into it when I've become a bit more kind of familiar with certain aspects of it, because I feel like there's a lot to draw upon in this, and it could be very, very useful, particularly for deep diving. Look at that, even that King of Pentacles got quite menacing energy. It's a menacing deck, yeah, that's what I want to say. Even just the movement in the pips I find quite menacing. The Tower, so much going on, just so much going on. It's like, you know, when I see it. Not today, Satan. Getting me to do too much. The part of me that just can't multitask to save my life. That's what it feels like looking at this deck sometimes. Like, no, just give me one symbol. I don't need hundreds. Thank you. But yeah, that, my friends, is the Hermetic Tarot. A wonderful kind of eerie, it's very like dramatic deck, I want to say. Yeah, well, it's intimidating. It's very intimidating. And yeah, don't be like me and use this, like buy this as your first deck, because you know, you won't be getting much use out of it, you know, I don't think, unless for some reason you just really like intuitively bond with it. Okay, next up, another intimidating deck that I have, bada bing bada boom, is the Prisma Visions deck I've had for quite a while. I think I've mentioned this before, and yes guys, I still have not given it much use. Why? Oh, why? That is a good question. Why do I find this deck intimidating? Partly it's probably my partial crappy eyesight. It's quite hard to actually see anything going on in this deck. It's quite dark, it's quite murky. I love the fact that I got 2 full cards. I was still trying to, you know, egg me on to kind of like, I'm gonna try and keep it in order, to give it a go, I think, take the risk. But it's just very like, almost too murky, almost too dreamlike for me to kind of get anything from. But like I said, I haven't worked from it, but that's putting me off working with it. I have to say, it's not calling to me. I really and truthfully kind of got it in one, you know, for one reason, because I loved how all the cards came together and told a story. The storyteller in me loved that. Oh my god, I lay the cards out and they create a bigger image, and that's so cool. And it is cool. It really is. But there's also energy in this I don't understand, and the darkness of it, like trying to decipher what the images are with all this sort of pointillism, can be quite tricky sometimes, and I get frustrated with that. Like, I want to be able to see the image clearly, you know, because I'm trying to get clarity when I'm, you know, using a deck. I don't want to feel less clarity by using a certain deck, if that makes sense. And that's why it's intimidating, because I got to get used to knowing these cards, I think. I do think some of them are very well done though. That's why I've kept hold of it so far, but I am considering decluttering it because of this lack of use and this sort of kind of intimidating nature in terms of the art style, I want to say. Like, it's beautiful, it really is, but I struggle with the sort of murkiness of it. Like, it's quite difficult to make out figures in this deck sometimes. And what the hell is this sun card, you know? It's strange. Judgment, I love the aspect of doors used here. 100% love that. Which reminds me of, I don't know if you guys ever watched a show called Being Human. It's like where a werewolf, a ghost and a vampire all live together in a flat. Watch the UK version, it's better than the US version. Sorry guys, but it's true. And it's got the hot spice Aidan Turner from Poldark in it. So yes, our Irish hunk. And basically, you know, doors arrive there for when people are like meant to be moving on and they don't want to, like the ghost character. So that kind of speaks to that for me, but I digress. Look, when we start getting into the minors, they become borderless and even a bit more like dreamy and dark and murky. I feel like this lends itself well to certain work potentially. If you guys have this deck, let me know how you use it. If you found it easy to use, or if you didn't, did you find a way to help you get past that sort of kind of intimidation when it comes to the kind of art style and the, you know, kind of hard to make out aspects of this, like the characters, like they kind of weave into like the flowers here, you can see, kind of tricky to catch them if you're not really looking, you know. Ten of Wands there. Like, even the meanings are a little bit hard to grasp, but they're harder to grasp because of that, like, inability to see the character sometimes. Like here again, like you have to really look. It could just be because I have dodgy eyes, I don't know. But like I want to make use of this deck, but I may be coming to a point of, you know, giving it to someone, or, you know, getting it out of the collection and seeing whether it would fit someone else better. You know, I do feel I'm getting to that point. So yeah, that's the Prisma Visions. Definitely intimidating, but kind of just because I struggled to know how to use it, and the artwork's kind of difficult for me to kind of make out the depictions, I guess. Very dark deck in that regard. Okay, so next up, the next intimidating deck that I have, which might be a surprise because it's also a very beautiful deck, I have to say, is the beautiful Botanicals deck. It comes in this lovely, lovely box. It is so well produced and put together. So you're like, really? How can this be intimidating? It's floral energy. Look at it. It's beautiful. Yes, 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 guys. It is. It's a beautiful deck. It truly is. You cannot, you know, take that away from it in any way, shape or form. But what you do have to bear in mind of this deck is that its energy can be quite difficult to read plainly from the imagery. The imagery is beautiful, but in terms of, you know, kind of being able to read the meaning of the card from that, it takes some study. You're going to have to know, you know, read the book, understand the kind of plant's relevance to the message, you know, because unless you really know the sort of plant symbolism and how it can be matched with these kind of energies of the cards, it could be tricky because you're literally just getting, oh look, there's a beautiful flower there, and we don't even have a keyword, we don't have even a name. Sometimes you've got to actually learn how to read this key so we know what we're at. You know, it's not the hardest, bit tricky for the majors, but like, you know, you see here it's going to be the Hierophant, that sort of cross kind of energy here, but not, you know, not kind of the most intuitive, I wouldn't say, not for me anyway. It is intimidating. It is beautiful but intimidating because there's not a lot to go off of here, and it's going to take a lot of like background knowledge in botanicals and plant life, and also just reading this book within itself to see how the actual artists put them together, because what you might know, these plants might not fit this system, right? So yeah, and that's intimidating. It's a very strong, bold deck as well, so kind of, I don't know if I'd call that intimidating energy, to be fair, but the intimidation really, like I said, comes from the kind of lack of keywords, knowing what card you're on, like, you know, having anything else happening in these cards other than the plant life itself. I'm sure once I dive a bit deeper into it, you know, as I'm going to be working with this deck for spring to kind of expand my botanical kind of knowledge and marry that with the tarot, it will become easier, and maybe I will see things within this imagery where I'm like, oh yeah, no, the guy chose to the artist chose, you know, the flowers to be, you know, pointing this way, or, you know, with petals missing, or, you know, whatever else you want to kind of look into to actually donate the kind of energy here. And I would have missed that if I hadn't read through the book. But on first glance, I'm sure most of you, you know, would you be able to read this without reading the book? You know, would you, from the energy? Perhaps. I think more likely than not, most of us would say no. And that's why it has to go in this category. It's not a straightforward, you know, read out of the box deck for me in any way, shape or form. Beautiful though, hauntingly beautiful in some aspects. It's going to be a kind of deck that I kind of just use a one card pull for, I think, and probably use another tarot deck alongside with it to kind of help kind of fit the message. So yeah, intimidating for sure. Takes a lot of background knowledge in botanicals and the book to be able to get the most out of this deck, I feel. So that's why it is in this category. The Botanica deck is beautiful though, so if you can get your hands on it and you're interested in learning sort of flower language, definitely have a look into it. It might be up your alley, but it's gonna take some study, guys, unless you're already very familiar with these meanings and symbology of these plants. It's gonna take some study. Next up, we have another oracle offering, and that is the Wild Unknown Archetypes deck. Now, how many of us have this? Quite a lot of us, I believe. Why is this in my intimidating decks? For a few reasons. The notion of archetypes themselves are quite confronting and quite intimidating, I think, when we have to look at those aspects of ourselves, you know, them sort of, you know, that nod to Jungian kind of psychotherapy and psychology. It's really getting into those shadow aspects of ourselves, you know, those core parts of ourselves, and that's quite an intimidating work. And this deck has that sort of nod to it. You're actually going to see if we've gone through to try and make this deck a bit easier for me, because the other aspect of this deck that I find intimidating really is the system itself. I don't know how to make use of it as one deck. It's kind of split into different kind of parts, like places, self, things of that nature. Let's look at the book. Yeah, understanding the deck. See, you need to read the book definitely to make better use of this deck. You have the selves, the places, the tools, the initiations, you know, 4 different kind of parts of the system. And I find it quite difficult to do a reading where I have this whole deck together and trying to make use of that. I just think it's far better to, split the deck. So that's what I've done, and Casper the Boy Diviner suggested this, and kudos for him, because I think that does make the deck more workable. It's also intimidating because it's a large deck and it's round and it's very hard for me to shuffle. I struggle with that. I really do struggle with this deck in a few different ways, and I find it intimidating and therefore don't reach for it for a few different reasons. The size and the shape being one of them, the system being one of them. A big drawback for me of this deck also, which I find quite intimidating, is the imagery itself. I really struggle to read anything intuitively from these images. I don't feel like they marry very well with their keywords or what they're about, like the tear, should I say rather. It's a struggle for me. I don't understand this deck sometimes. The messages I get from it can be a bit hard to grasp, particularly, like I said, if you're trying to use it like all as one, can be a little bit, the reading can get choppy and a bit murky because it becomes difficult to understand. I feel like if you're trying to look at, you know, certain archetypal energy within yourself, split this deck into the selves, use it. If you're looking for a tool to help you with what the question you're asking is, like Casper suggested, get all the tools cards together and shuffle from that. And one, it makes the deck easier to use on a physical level, and secondly, it just makes the reading more succinct, I think, and more, you know, more clarity is gained that way. But yeah, I struggle with it. It's intimidating because I don't understand the imagery. Doesn't have anything to do with the meaning as far as I read it, and that's a drawback for me. It's a shame, actually. It's something I wish was different about this deck, in all honesty. Like, the energy is strong. Like, there is quite a lot of intimidating energy from the imagery in itself. This sort of collage-y kind of mixture of kind of symbols, drawings, almost some of them look like photos and paintings that really draw you in, but I don't really get any intuitive hits from this deck. The guidebook is fascinating, but again, I find the messages quite hard to grasp. Sometimes there's a lot within the guidebook. For you that are familiar, those that are not, like, you know, Kim Kranz, she's a great writer and a great creator of decks. I have a few of her decks, but there's like a lot to draw on. There's like a passage, and when light, when dark, go deeper, then some kind of guidance on the side here, like telling you to look into certain artists or writers, you know, to really dive deep into it. It's a deck that you really do have to sit with and do quite deep work with, but it doesn't draw, like, doesn't speak to me as much as my other deep divers, so I don't reach for it very often. I'm actually thinking about decluttering this because I don't make use of it because of that nature of it. I find it a bit much, and I don't find it resonates because of this lack of correlation with the imagery and the meaning, which is a shame. It's a shame, but you know, that's the truth of it, unfortunately. Yeah, let me know what you think of this deck. Again, I see like so many people have it and seem to make use of it, but it's definitely a struggle for me. And it's that sort of lack of clarity that I get from it, the kind of mismatch of kind of imagery, energy and meaning that I find intimidating, that I can't make sense of something. I'm turning to this deck to kind of come out of the dark, and yet I find myself more in the dark when I use it sometimes, and that's not my favorite thing. So yeah, that is the Archetypes deck by the Wild Unknown Archetypes deck by Kim Kranz. So yeah, let me know how you get on with that. I will be interested to see how other people make use of this deck, if there's something I might be doing wrong, if there's something I could, you know, kind of adopt in terms of my practice with it that would make it easier for me. Let me know. Okay, next up, I thought we'd go to a slightly different realm in terms of the intimidating, and this isn't because this is a system of a deck that's intimidating to use, or like it making me painfully aware of my gaps in knowledge, but more so because the energy of the deck itself is intimidating. So we're going to look a bit towards my more shadow decks, I guess. And first up, we have the Blackwater Tarot. Intimidating deck. Why? It's quite a dark deck. It's quite a visceral deck. It's quite a macabre deck. And some of the decks, some of the cards in this are quite confronting. And yeah, violent. So I'll give you that disclaimer now. There's some violence, there's some nudity, there's some like kind of grim sort of timber and esque kind of characters within this deck that I find quite intimidating, a bit eerie. So yeah, that's why it comes into this intimidating decks category. Look at this Six of Wands. So used to like victory being painted as like, yes, he's come back triumphant, but here look at all of the sort of violence within that card. Like the horse is going crazy, the victor here looks like he's gone crazed as well. There's just so much sort of black and white kind of ink spots there, you know, all this visceral kind of violent energy. The Strength card again, the ink spots looking like blood. She's really fighting off this sort of beast. You know, it's very confronting and intimidating, you know, which is why I use it for shadow work. It kind of draws you out a little bit, this deck. It's not one you want to kind of use all the time, I don't think. I think you need to be okay with sitting in that confronting energy before you use this deck, in all honesty. Some people might not like this imagery, which is why, again, it could be seen as intimidating. But it serves its purpose. It serves its purpose to sort of confront. That's what it was bought for, and that is why it fits into this category in so well. You know, sometimes we need those decks that, you know, we think, oh, do I want to use it? What's it going to tell me? Is it going to slap me in the face today? You know, and that we do feel a little bit intimidated by, so we can get past that energy. You know, especially if we're trying to integrate our shadows and confront those darker, maybe more unconscious aspects of ourselves. We need a deck that sort of reflects that energy, marries that energy. You know, can work with that energy alongside us. You know, it's not a fluffy deck by any means. Look at that Ten of Swords, like total overkill, right? We can have barely even seen the figure there. He's so kind of like ruined by the swords there. You know, the kings and queens they're confronting, the devil's confronting, the cards that should be confronting are, but definitely has this sort of, the death card here, this sort of transformation of death here, you know. It is kind of a bit gruesome because of the skeleton, but it really does speak to the energy, you know. It's worthwhile. And it does give us some breaks with these nicer cards to do with the star, etc. Got a real heart and the Three of Swords there to really donate that pain. So yeah, it is intimidating because the imagery is so confrontational, I want to say. Kind of weird in some aspects, like a Tim Burton movie, twisted, almost eerie. You know, not always the nicest characters to look at, you know, they're kind of distorted. But they help us look at those aspects of ourselves, you know, and personify them almost as well, and get used to that, like kind of accepting those parts of ourselves that are maybe a little bit, you know, distorted, or you know, disfigured, or, you know, not quite what they seem, in the dark, shadowy, violent, even, you know, confronting those harder emotions. So yeah, intimidating but worthwhile. I thought I'd throw it in there as a kind of deck to do with kind of more shadow work and that sort of intimidating energy in itself. That's the Blackwater Tarot by Noah Rogers, the UK creator. I will put their links down below, or in the description rather, because yeah, it's always good to support indie deck creators, right? I think another deck that speaks to that intimidating energy, you know, more along the lines of confrontational and more shadow worky kind of decks, is the Lubanku Tarot. There are some cards in here that really are not people's favourites. I think this can be quite an intimidating deck because of those dark cards. Although I don't feel too intimidated by it, I have to be honest. I've worked with it enough, and I find the cards that could be quite confronting in this, you know, useful. I understand what they mean. But yeah, it is an intimidating deck when you first get it. It's definitely not a fluffy deck. Look at the Six of Cups, for example. It's not quite the energy we're used to seeing from the Six of Cups. It's quite macabre. It's quite a darker aspect of that sort of nostalgia, or that kind of past, you know, childhood kind of memories, almost being trapped in them. You know, the artwork in this is a bit visceral in some aspects as well, which is quite confronting. You know, a lot of the reds and stuff that I used in this deck through certain cards, I find quite confronting, actually. A bit scary, some of them, to be fair. The energy, that frenetic energy, even within the one suit, even when it's something that's quite positive, is a bit like, ooh, okay. Yeah, I can definitely see why some people be intimidated by this deck, hence why I'm putting it in my intimidating decks. And I have found it, you know, especially when you're confronting stuff to do with your relationship, should I say, or yeah, that's what this deck is quite good for in terms of shadow work, like doing work on how you relate to others, you know, how you form relationships, the attachments, style you may have, you know, your relationship with sex even, you know, things of that nature, romance, connection. There's a lot to draw upon on this. And it's quite, yeah, it can be intimidating, you know. Look, again, the Lovers card, probably one of the most intimidating, confrontational Lovers cards ever depicted, right? That sort of proper, like, codependency almost. They're, like, really kind of being so into someone, you're basically, like, consuming them, you know, all-consuming love, having to be able to confront that element in yourself, potentially, you know. It's quite a dark deck, you know, even though its colours are like quite strong and bold, and there's a lot of dark elements to this. Eerie cards almost. Even the Seven of Cups, you know, quite otherworldly. You get this sort of sketchy kind of these borders, like very thick black borders as well, like that, you know, sharpen quite a few of the cards that just have this sort of almost like a jarring energy, I want to say, like, oh, like a sketchy sort of, you know, creature in the night kind of energy. That's, what is the word I'm looking for? something you can't, like, the outlines are not made out like clearly, you know. So it gives you that frenetic energy, which can be a bit, you know, intimidating and a bit confronting sometimes. Like I said, I do, like, you know, I do appreciate this deck for that. But, you know, again, the devil, this can be quite an intimidating card as well. You know, this image of attachment and, like, it kind of, you know, we have a horned figure here, but we also have, like, a lot of that sort of nod to, you know, sexual elements. That can be quite intimidating for a lot of us to sort of confront it within ourselves. All these kind of weird masked creatures throughout this. There's a lot of figures without faces. That's something I particularly find quite creepy and intimidating, to be honest. Even within certain suits, like the cup suits, we have a King of Cups in this that I really struggle to get on with. Like, he intimidates me, and that's not how I see the King of Cups, but it's another way of looking at different aspects of these characters and these cards, which I appreciate. But definitely, you know, you have to be open to receiving this deck's energy, I think, and to be able to have an open perspective on the meanings for the cards that it's trying to illuminate for us. And that can be a bit much, I think, can be a bit overwhelming at times. So as much as I could probably, you know, I've worked with this deck enough, I could use it, you know, for a lot of different reads. I think it just serves better purpose when you're able to sit with the message a bit and actually be okay with confronting whatever darkness resides in you or things you want to heal. Look at her, she's scary, that High Priestess, right? She really is. There are some scary, intimidating characters in this deck, for sure, for sure, for sure. So yeah, God, even this Judgment is quite terrifying, right? Like, you're being taken, are you being taken up, or are you going down to the hells of, like, hellfire of Hades? What's going on? You know, have you passed the test? So yeah, definitely has intimidating energy, very strong energy, this deck, for sure. Although I see it quite as a sassy deck, which kind of is kind of feminine, it does have a lot of masculine energy within this deck, that's for sure. I see that a lot with, like, the male characters in the deck and a lot of the kind of stances and colours used, like the reds, you know, the stances with the swords that a lot of the characters have, even with the wands here, very masculine. So yeah, that always speaks to being a bit more intimidating for me. Very, like, action orientated, very, like, it's a very triggering deck. But it invites you to heal through those triggers, I think, anyway, if you're willing to give it a go. So yeah, that is the Lubanku Tarot. Another intimidating intimidating offering, for sure. And I guess we'll end up on another one that's within that thread, but an oracle this time, and that's the Forest of Precious Twigs. This is designed as a shadow work kind of deck. I feel like it was completed through someone as they were going through that themselves, the artist. So yeah, and that's Trisha Murray. Just give her the shout out there. The imagery in this is very confronting and actually quite intimidating, scary. Look at this, we have this sort of, is it your glasses that are falling over? Almost like scary movie kind of scene, right? Someone's fallen over, their glasses have fallen off, and then, you know, in the reflection of the glasses, you've seen some shadowy figures that are bearing down on them, like, is their life over now? You know, shadowy figures confronting you, but even children in this deck kind of, you know, nods to kind of almost like kind of self-harm in some regards, you know, death figures, like, coming to kind of pick you up, you know, these scream like Edvard Munch figures. There's so much going on here, and yeah, it's a scary deck. It is. It's eerie. It's creepy. Some of these figures, they're looking right at you. You know, the sketchiness of the charcoal, the black and white elements. You know, a lot of masked figures as well. Really takes you into these sort of deeper, kind of darker parts of yourself, and that's, you know, that can be quite intimidating for a lot of us, I think. You know, I always see that as Edgar Allan Poe's Crow, that one, and I find him quite a macabre character, and his stories, it does remind me of his stories a little bit for some reason. There's nods to him in this deck, I think. Yeah, but it's so weird as well. You get this elephant on people's heads like coming up quite a few times, which is interesting. But yeah, it's the dark aspect of it, the black and white nature of the deck, the figures, the system, you know, it's got its own system you kind of need to learn, the passages on the back, you know, they can help you, they can help ground you with the message for sure, but they sometimes take, you know, a bit of time to sink in, I want to say. But if you're willing to kind of sit with this, like take one card, I would say that would be the most kind of simple way to start with it and just sit with it. A lot can come up. It can be a very healing deck. You know, this is clearly a healing practice drawing these for the artist, and it's really cool that, you know, she's created this now as something that can help others, you know, through their same or similar journeys, I guess, you know, because we can relate to these images. There's no words, but the kind of characters, the way they're drawn, what's going on in the scene, they all kind of give us some intuitive healing, intuitive feelings, and can help us explore our inner psyche a bit more and our shadows a bit more, I think. So although it could be intimidating to sit down with this deck on first look, first glance, you might think, oh, that's not for me, that's a bit dreary, like where's the light aspects? There are light aspects in these cards too, so don't feel too intimidated if you are ever confronted with this deck and it seems to be something for you. Give it a go. But I had to put it in because it definitely does fit that energy, especially as a sort of shadow work deck. So yeah. So guys, that's it for my intimidating decks. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks once again to Tarot Natt Plans for making this tag. I'd definitely like to see more people do VRs to it. Definitely get on board if you see this, that would be really cool. Or if you don't have a YouTube channel, definitely get in the comments, you know, let's start sharing what our most intimidating decks have been. I think it's good for us to be open about that, you know, decks that might have been a bit of a struggle for us to work with for, you know, various different reasons. And maybe shout out, you know, how you can overcome that, really, especially with some of these decks I've mentioned here. I could do with some kind of advice in regards to some of them for sure before they leave my collection. So yeah, definitely jump on board. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. You know, if you like the channel, come and join the treehouse. We'd love to have you. Just a subscribe button away. And yeah, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.